Hi, I'm Ramiro. Thank you for joining me on my channel today. You know, retirement planning can feel overwhelming at times, but qualified plans are designed to make it easier for us. So let's talk about them today. Okay, in this video, I'm going to be talking about qualified plans, but I'm going to be using the 401k as an example throughout this video. And the reason I'm using 401k is because that's the most utilized plan there is out there. So I'm going to be discussing the tax advantages that it comes with, but also some of the potential disadvantages as well. So I'm hoping by the end of this video, you'll be much better informed about how qualified plans work. But before we start, why don't we have a little history lesson on how 401ks even started? The 401k retirement savings plan has a relatively modern history in the US. It was introduced as a result of legislative changes and financial trends that transformed how Americans save for retirement. The 401k plan originated from the Revenue Act of 1978, which was primarily intended to reduce tax loopholes. Within the Act, Section 401k allowed employees to defer taxation on a portion of their salary by placing it into a retirement account. However, the intention behind this provision was not to create a widespread retirement savings vehicle, but to address profit sharing bonuses and executive compensation plans. Ted Benna, a benefits consultant, is often credited with recognizing the potential of Section 401k for general employee retirement savings. In 1980, Benna proposed using the provision to create a tax-deferred savings plan that allowed employees to contribute a portion of their salary into a retirement fund with pre-tax dollars, while companies could match those contributions. This idea gained traction and transformed the way many Americans began saving for retirement. In the 1980s, the U.S. Treasury issued regulations supporting the 401k, and many companies began adopting it as a replacement or supplement to traditional defined benefit pension plans. Unlike pensions, where employers guaranteed a fixed payout upon retirement, 401k plans shifted responsibility to employees who would now contribute and invest their savings in various assets, such as stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The popularity of 401k plans surged in the 1980s and 1990s because they offered employers a more predictable cost structure compared to traditional pensions. At the same time, employees were attracted to the potential for higher returns through investments, the flexibility of controlling their contributions, and the tax advantages. During the early 2000s, 401k plans faced scrutiny as stock market downturns, including the 2008 financial crisis, caused significant losses in retirement savings. These events revealed vulnerabilities in relying solely on individual retirement savings accounts, prompting discussions about the adequacy of 401k plans in ensuring secure retirements. Today, the 401k remains one of the most popular retirement savings vehicles in the U.S., with more than 60 million Americans participating. The 401k system continues to evolve, with changes such as the introduction of Roth 401k plans, which allow for after tax contributions, and increased government scrutiny of fees and transparency. The rise of the 401k signaled a broader shift in the U.S. from defined benefit plans, where employers guaranteed retirees' income, to defined contribution plans, where employees bear the investment risk. While 401ks offer flexibility and growth potential, they also place responsibility for retirement savings on individual workers, posing challenges for those with insufficient financial literacy or limited income. All right, so when we talk about qualified plans, there are quite a few options out there. I've mentioned a couple of them in the history, such as pension plans. Basically, a pension plan is where the employer is on the hook to provide a retirement benefit, a specified retirement benefit for the employee that generally lasts for the employee's lifetime during retirement. And the employer is on the hook to provide that benefit. Obviously, 401ks, which is what we discussed. This is where this is a retirement savings vehicle that allows the employee to defer a portion of their salary or their pay on a pre-tax or post-tax basis into a retirement savings vehicle that allows them to save for retirement. And oftentimes there is a company match that goes along with that. But whether we're talking about pension plans or 401ks or traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs, you name it, they all have one thing in common, and they are all classified as qualified plans. Well, what does a qualified plan mean? Basically, it's just a retirement savings plan that meets specific IRS requirements, offering tax benefits for both the employers and the employees. That's pretty much it. But if it's a qualified plan, it comes with strings attached to it and rules that you have to follow. And a lot of times, it gives limited access to the funds in there. So let's go ahead and talk more about qualified plans. And like I said, using the 401k as an example. Okay, qualified plans do two things. They defer the tax. And that's often a good thing because people say, hey, I can save taxes today if I put money into this plan and I don't, have to pay taxes on it. They defer the tax. So you're really not getting away with not paying taxes when you defer the tax. You're really, I think a better word is just you're postponing that tax, okay, to a later time. And so one of the things you have to consider is that you're going to be postponing the tax, but you're also going to be postponing the tax calculation. So kind of think about that because when you're in retirement, what tax bracket are you going to be in? We don't know. You could be in a higher tax bracket, which would not be a good thing. You could be in a lower tax bracket, which would work out pretty well for you. And a lot of people count on that. They say, well, I'll probably be in a lower tax bracket. But you don't necessarily know that for sure because we don't have any control over taxes. I wish we did. But another thing too is when I'm working with clients, and I'm helping them plan for their retirement, I can honestly tell you this, none of them tell me I want to retire with less income. They all say, hey, I want to retire with the maximum income I can have. And if I can maintain my lifestyle the way it is, that's what I want to do. So if that's the case, they probably aren't wanting to be in a lower tax bracket. But let me ask you another question too. When we talk about our tax history, the tax code has been part of the law and has been part of our life since 1913. And as you know, we have tax brackets, different tax brackets in our tax code. The more money you make, the higher tax bracket you enter into. And right now, the highest tax bracket we have is 37%. So if I was going to ask you a question and ask you to guess, what do you think's been the highest tax bracket in our tax history going back to 1913? What do you think it would be? You think it'd be lower than it is now, higher than it is now, the same? Well, that's a good question. Why don't we take a look and see? Yes, 94% has been the highest tax bracket since the tax code was introduced. And when was that? Well, that was in 1945. And it makes a lot of sense because if you remember, that was the end of World War II. And our country borrowed a ton of money to help pay for all those tanks and battleships and airplanes, all those things to win the war. But back then, our government realized that that debt had to be paid off. And so their approach was, look, all of us are going to suffer. All of us are going to have to tighten the belt. And that meant increasing taxes on everyone. So if I were to average the tax brackets from 1913 to now, that average comes out to 56.58%. So if you compare that to the tax bracket that we're in now, which is 37%, that actually doesn't make you feel so bad now, right? And by the way, to be in the 37% tax bracket, you have to earn over $731,200. Okay. But looking at averages, you can see that we're below the average. So when it comes to planning for your retirement, do you want to count on lower tax brackets or higher tax brackets? A lot of times, my clients and I plan on higher tax brackets because if we're wrong, that's great. That means money, we'll have more money than we planned for. But the other thing to consider too is what deductions are you going to have when you do start taking the money out? Most people, when they retire, they don't have any children anymore, and their mortgages are paid off. And those are two of the biggest tax deductions that we get. You know, any dependents that we have, we get a dependent tax break. And also our mortgage interest, we get to deduct. Most of the time when people are in retirement, they've lost both those tax deductions. So let's take a look at qualified plans because, like I said, they postpone the tax and the tax calculation. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say somebody is contributing $5,000 a year to their plan. Let's say they're in the 22% tax bracket currently. And let's just say they're in the 22% tax bracket when they start taking withdrawals. We don't know if the taxes are going to be higher or lower, like I said, but let's just, for this purpose, let's just keep them the same. And let's say we have 20 years to accumulate. Now, the investment return, let's go ahead and put a more realistic return on here for the markets. Now, in one of my other videos, I mentioned that the S&P 500 over the last 30 years has given a return of 9.6%. So let's kind of dial it down and just use 8%. But let's use this as a calculation. So at the end of 20 years, your account balance will be 247,115. But that's not all yours. You've got a partner in this. You've got the IRS. So your share is going to be 192,749 because you're going to have to pay the IRS $54,365,000. Now let's just consider that if you were to just take this all out in one lump sum, which obviously nobody's going to do that, but just for uh, purposes here, you know, you would have to write a check to the IRS for $54,365. Now, compare that to the apparent taxes deferred. In other words, the benefit to you at the time was that you were going to save $22,000 in taxes. And that is true. You got to defer paying $22,000 in taxes, but think about it. You got to defer paying $22,000 in taxes so you can pay $54,000, 365 later on. Can you see why this is such a good deal for the IRS? Yeah, they're willing to forego $22,000 in taxes because they know 20 years later they're going to get 54,000. So just kind of keep that in mind. So continuing on, how do traditional qualified plans compare to Roth qualified plans? Because that is an option for people. And it's a really good option for people. And as I said in previously with Roth, we get to put in after-tax dollars into that. So let's go ahead and compare. Same scenario, $5,000 a year as a contribution, 22% tax bracket, 20 years of accumulation, and an investment return of 8%. So let's calculate it. So here's the thing. If you happen to be in the same tax bracket when you retire as you were during the accumulation period, then there is absolutely no difference in which option you choose, whether you choose traditional or Roth. You're going to end up with the actual same net amount of income in your pocket. And you can see that there because we're putting after-tax dollars in, which would mean $3,900 a year if we're paying that taxes. And it would accumulate to 192,000 on the tax-free side. On the taxable side, you're putting in 5,000. It would grow to 247, but you got to pay your taxes. So bottom line is you're going to get the same benefit. Where it makes a difference is if the taxes and the tax brackets that you're in are different. So let's say you do retire at a lower tax bracket, say 10% lower. So now you're in the 12% tax bracket. Then yeah, you're going to come out like a champ. It's actually going to work out very well for you because you'll end up with more money in your pocket by putting in pre-tax dollars as opposed to post-tax dollars. But what if you're in a higher tax bracket when you retire? And that was one of the reasons I wanted to show you the history of our taxes because, you know, looking at history, there is a good probability or high probability that we might be in a higher tax bracket when we retire. But what if we're in a 10% higher tax bracket? Well, kind of changes then because then The pre-tax dollar option isn't that good of a deal for us. We'll end up with more money on the tax-free option. Just something to keep in mind. But once again, taxation is something we have no control over. Let's keep going. So how do qualified plans compare with taxable investments? And by taxable investments, I'm talking about, say, like a savings account or a CD. So if we're looking at a savings account or CD, obviously you're not going to get that kind of return, but let's just say you can get a 4% return. And let's say you could get this, just to keep things equal, compare apples to apples, let's say you could get a 4% return on your 401k as well. Which one would actually be a better deal for you? Well, it's going to be your qualified plan on a pre-tax basis. And the reason why is because on the taxable investments, you're putting in after-tax dollars in that, but then you're paying income tax along the way as well. So what happens is that you end up with less in that particular situation. So if you were comparing whether putting money into your 401k on a pre-tax basis or opening up a regular bank CD or savings account for retirement, it's probably going to be better to just sock it away in your 401k. Let's keep going. So as I end this lesson, there's some questions to ask again. And that is the first one that I asked. What tax bracket are you going to be in at your retirement? We don't know because, like I said, we don't have any control over tax brackets and what they're going to be in the future. The government can raise them, they can lower them. Obviously, you saw that in the history. Second question is, what deductions are you going to have when you take the money? Most of us are going to have lost most of our biggest tax deductions by the time we retire. And then finally, what is your exit strategy? With all the unknowns and things that we don't have any control over, like interest rates, inflation, market rate returns, I mean, all these things we have no control over. What's the best thing to do to save for our retirement? And what's the best thing to do when we start pulling that money out? Well, that's a good question that you have for your financial advisor. And if you work with a qualified financial advisor, they will help you put together strategies. And it's going to be a strategy because it might be a combination of things. But that strategy is going to be in your best interest on how to structure your investments and your savings to come up with the situation that's going to provide you the best option when you do retire. So I hope you enjoyed my video on qualified plans. I hope you found it helpful and informative, and hopefully it helps you with your retirement planning. One thing I want you to keep in mind, and that is if your company offers a 401k or a retirement plan and they offer a match, I strongly recommend that you do that. Take full advantage of that company match. So in other words, contribute however much you need to in order to get that 100% match. That's such a valuable benefit to you in the long run. And think about it, it's free money. So you really should take advantage of that valuable benefit. The other thing I strongly recommend and suggest is that you work with a qualified financial advisor. That advisor is going to help you make these decisions and come up with strategies that's going to make your life a whole lot easier and most probably give you a better benefit at the end. And they're going to be well worth the fee, whatever it is that they charge, because I got to tell you, it's a sad thing to see somebody enter their retirement and they realize they've made the wrong decisions because we don't get do-overs in retirement. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing the best strategies available to you at the time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do now. Also, like this video and turn on notifications. I'll see you next time.